same length as it usually is. And we'll just be able to schmooze while we wait for the quiche to come out.
Stop not wasting our time.
So, everybody at some point in their life has someone step into their life at a moment where they're needed. And often it's not recognized in the moment. Sometimes there's the dramatic experience in which, for example, someone is walking on the street and they fall down. And they're elderly and they have a difficult time getting up. And just at that moment, somebody drives by who happens to be a doctor and is able to pick them up and check them out quickly to make sure that the scratches are just scratches and not broken bones. And it happens in life that these people appear at an odd time. Someone has lost a loved one, and then friends appear that maybe hadn't been around in years. And I tell you today that I think those people are angels. Now, while I don't believe in angels with wings and with halos, I do believe in angels that are human beings sent by God at specific moments. It's one of those things that helps me continue my belief that God is involved in our lives on a regular, daily basis. There are some who believe God set the world into motion and stepped back and has no more involvement, but I believe God is intimately involved in our lives. And sometimes God puts people in a certain place at a certain time for a certain purpose, and then they disappear again. They go back to their lives, we go back to our lives, and sometimes we don't cross paths again. But we recognize on further reflection that maybe those people were in fact messengers sent by the Almighty. And that is the story of this morning's Parsha, of Parshat Noach. The question only remains, who was Noach ministering to? And I'll offer you this suggestion this morning, that Noach is as much ministering to humanity as Noach was ministering to the Almighty. Now we imagine that Noach gives God hope in humanity. That when God gives up all hope on the human project that God has set forth in motion from creation, that God is horribly disappointed in the way human beings ended up treating each other and the world around them. And so God finds hope in one individual, in one person who is able to restart the process. So I'll share with you a couple interesting ideas, because at first it's Noah who is a savior to the people and not towards God. At the beginning of Breshit, it says, Arura hadama b'avurech b'itzavon, that when God becomes angry at Adam and Eve and dismisses them from the Garden of Eden, God says, cursed be the ground because of you. By toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. That in order to bring forth food from the ground, you're going to have to work hard. It's going to be by the sweat of your brow that you will be able to bring forth food. Up until that point, it just came up easily and without effort. But the punishment for eating of the wrong tree was that from now on, they're going to have to work hard to make sure that the ground brings forth food. Ha'aretz keshetizrena mimena yizarim tatzmiach kotz v'dardar kundas v'ikavayot, says Rashi. That the food is going to be brought from the ground with thorns and thistles, as if to suggest it's going to be hard to get food from the ground. It's going to be so hard. And that even when it comes forth from the ground, You're going to have to then work the food itself to separate the difficult parts from the good parts. It's not just that it's going to be hard to grow, but once it's grown, it's going to be hard to sift through it, to find what's good and what's not, what's edible and what's inedible. And then, at the beginning of this week's Parsha, Vayikra et Shemo Noach Lemor, and he was referred to as Noach because Ze Yinachamenu Mima'asenu Umitzitzavon Yadenu. Because Noach was the one who said, I know ways to make growing produce a little easier. You won't have to work so hard. It'll still be difficult, but it won't be as hard as it once was. Because Noach, Zeh Yinachamenu, God sends forth Noach as an individual who will bring some comfort. The word Noach there meaning to bring comfort, saying that this one will provide relief for you. And then Rashi explains, well, Noach had mastered some of the art of tilling the soil. He had constructed instruments that would make it more simple to be able to draw forth food from the ground. And so Noach wasn't meant to ease God's burden, but to ease humanity's, because he was able to show them how to work the ground in such a way that it was easier to bring forth food. And so Rashi explains, of course, that those are the techniques that he brought with him, the implements required for cultivating the soil to yield fruit. And so he brings relief from the labor and for the painful toil that had caused them to work the earth. And so Noach was supposed to be someone for whom humanity would look back and say, he invented technology that made our lives easier, that made our lives better. And we all have that in every generation. We have people who bring forth technology that is supposed to make our lives better, easier. But we recognize all the while that with every piece of technology that's brought forth, something bad can come from it. We know that we can more easily communicate with each other today than ever before because of the social media platforms in which we all engage. But we also recognize how quickly that can be turned to cyberbullying and other means of hurting other people. A word spreads much faster today than it ever did before, which means we ought to be more careful in what we say, but unfortunately that piece of our development hasn't caught up to the technology. And so just like Noah, who invented technology for tilling the ground and working the soil, those instruments quickly turned to instruments of war. And people turned on each other. Va'aretz malei chamas. The world was filled with chaos and violence and anger and hatred, and we hurt each other. Vayar Adonai ki rabba ra'at ha'adam ba'aretz v'chol yetzer machshavot libo rak ra kol hayom. And Genesis says God saw how great was man's wickedness on the earth, and how every plan devised by his mind was nothing but evil all the time. Vayinachem Adonai ki asa et ha'adam ba'aretz v'yit'atzev al libo. And God regretted ever having made man in the first place. It's reminiscent of the argument in the Gemara in which one rabbi says to another, would have it been better had humanity not been born? Or have the pluses outweighed the minuses? Have we brought more goodness into the world than evil? Has the balance tipped in the favor of the positive? And the rabbis ultimately, in their discussion, decide, probably not. We've probably done more evil than good, more bad than positive. And so maybe it would have been better that humanity had not been born in the first place. And then in the greatest of insight, a rabbi suggests, well, we're here. We might as well make the best of it. because the theoretical conversations are great about good and evil, about bad and good. But the truth is, we're here. We got to make the best of it. And so it goes on. Vayichal Noach ish adama vayita kerem. Noah takes his skills for tilling the soil, and he ascends the ark. And he takes with him animals, and he watches the world get wiped out, but he keeps those tools in his belt. And as soon as he emerges from the ark, he goes about planting once again. He could have turned to the Almighty and said, it would have been better had the world not been created, had everything been wiped out, but I'm here anyways. I might as well make the best of it. And so he takes those very same tools that birthed the violence in the world, and he starts all over again. And he tills the soil, and he makes a garden, and he plants a vineyard, and he brings forth wine. And then you know what he does. He drinks. And the reason why he drinks is because he looks out at the devastation. All his friends and family are gone, except for those he brought onto the ark. All of his neighbors are gone. All the animals that didn't make it onto the boat are gone. All the trees and all the produce, all the gardens and all the vineyards are destroyed. And he becomes filled with anguish, and he has a drink. And we're left to ask the question, so he brought kindness and compassion and ease and relief to humanity through the tools he brought to them. And he brings hope and trust in a future to the Almighty. When God believes that all is lost, Noah is a shining example of hope for a future that's better than what exists now. He brings relief to humanity. He brings relief to God, and he walks off the boat, and he's left with the question, so who's going to bring me relief now? If I've been the hope for the generation, if I was the hope of the generation, who's going to be the hope for me? Who's going to take care of me? Who's going to bring me relief? So as much as I would like this sermon to be about the necessity for you to be the relief in someone else's life, that is usually reserved for heroes, not angels. The capacity to stand in the moment in the face of evil and to rise up above them and against them and to say, ow, stop it, is the role of a hero, not an angel. An angel says, I'm just going to be here for you, one individual at a time. We see that all the time in the stories of angels that appear in the Torah. They rarely save an entire generation. They're usually there for just one person. So as much as I want this to be a sermon about how you need to be an angel for one person in another life, I'll give you a simpler task for today. Simply identify the angels that exist in your world already and thank them for being there. For all those people that have come to your assistance in time of need, you be the Noach for them. And you know who learns this lesson best? Noach's children. At the end of the story, Noach leaves himself in an embarrassing circumstance, and his children come and, in an angelic way, they care for their father. They know what it means to be an angel for someone else because they were raised by a gentleman who was an angel to humanity. Just because other people couldn't identify him as such doesn't make him any less holy. Just because no one would listen to the heed of the building of an ark in their backyard doesn't mean that his work wasn't important. He was an angel for God and for humanity. If you can't be an angel for someone else in your life, then I beg of you today, make sure to at least identify the angel in your backyard. Make sure to identify the angel in your neighborhood. The one who maybe returns your mail when it gets delivered to the wrong house. Maybe the individual who is there when you call out, I've fallen and I can't get up. Maybe it's the individual who is standing behind you in line at the supermarket where you've fallen short a few pennies and they offer to fill in the gap. There are angels abound us in our world. If you can't be one, at least find one. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. We continue with Musaf. Page 184, Chatzi Kaddish, please rise.
Yitkada v'yitkada shemei Rabba.
Amen.
V'amad yivrach yirtei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayei